And I think one of the reasons it's unique is that once you say our religion is only based on one sacred text, you put yourself in two challenging positions. And the first of those positions is that your religion becomes unchangeable. And what I mean by that is not that you can't change your teachings. Of course you can do that, but you are very easily held accountable for those changes, right? If you write everything down and say, this is what we believe, and then 100 years or 1,000 years later, you're not believing what you said you believed back then, well, people can say, well, look, these people, they change their mind all the time. What's to believe in their religion? When you put your text down on paper, you make it unchangeable. Think for a second about, like, if I were to be accused of a crime, and somebody came to me and they said, were you at this place at this time? They asked for my alibi, and I didn't say anything. They might still be able to convict me of a crime, but it would be far harder because they don't have anything that I said, anything that I stated, anything that I put down. What if then I said, though, okay, my alibi is I was at the store at that time. Well, suddenly they have something that they can hold me accountable to, right? And this is exactly what the Christians did with the scriptures. When they wrote these things down and said, this is what we believe, they made themselves essentially accountable to everyone outside of them. The second challenge that you put yourself in if you put your religion down into a text is that your religion becomes testable. And what I mean by that is that a person can look back at your text and they can say, well, this thing has changed, or that was corrupted, or that wasn't copied down correctly, or that's not historically accurate. Right? A person can actually criticize what you fundamentally believe, even if you've never changed that belief. Again, think of me giving my alibi for my committed crime. If I just say I was at the store, that's something you can hold me accountable to. But what if I said, no, I was specifically at that superstore over there on Argentia from 3:30 to 4:30, and I talked to 4 specific people. Here are their names, and I bought olive oil and milk while I was there, and here's the receipt. Well, suddenly there's a whole bunch of other things you can test to see if I'm falsifying the story, right? Now, the interesting thing about the early Christian church is that they were hyper detail oriented. At the time, the longest letters that we get from one person to another come from people, maybe you know these names, like Cicero and Seneca. They were some of the more learned people who would send letters to people that they knew in order to educate them. Some of these long letters from people like Cicero or Seneca are about 1,000 words long, about 1,000 words long. The New Testament, in comparison, is massive. You think about Paul the apostle wrote letters to a number of churches and individuals that we have contained for us in the New Testament. The length of his letters in comparison to what Cicero or Seneca wrote is uncomparable. The book of Romans is 7,100 words, 1 Corinthians 6,800, 2 Corinthians about 4,500 words. One scholar that I read on this said, when people received Paul's letters for the first time, they would have been more surprised by the length than by the content. Isn't that interesting? You put on top of this the length of the Gospels. So the 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. They are all even longer than Paul's letters. The shortest of those Gospels is Mark. It's about 11,000 words. And if you take Luke and Acts together, which they're meant to be, 2 volumes of the same story, they together are 38,000 words. These were massive documents, super detailed documents that the early Christian church was putting out. And on top of this, the idea of having 4 Gospels was pretty unique. You have 4 biographies of Jesus, right? Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. The idea of writing multiple biographies of a single character in history was unheard of, and yet the early Christians wrote 4 in the span of about 20 years or so, depending on who you trust in scholarly research. Why have so much detail? Why be so specific? Why make these long, long documents? I mean, I think every person who comes to the Bible for the first time looks at it and says, that's really long. It is. Why? Well, I think the first thing for us to learn is the Christians weren't afraid of being proven wrong. Right? They weren't trying to make up a vague story in order to get one by on people. They knew what they had seen, they knew it was historically accurate, and they knew that even if people would test them later on it, they would find the exact same thing they found. And this is actually played out. After 2,000 years of history, these texts being able to be scrutinized by people who do not believe what we believe, they have yet to find a contradiction or a historically inaccurate fact in the entire scripture. Now, they'll make the claim that this thing is inaccurate or this thing isn't in line with other parts of the scripture, but there are actually answers to every single one of those questions. And by the way, if anybody ever comes to you with a question about the validity of the scriptures as just a historical document, come talk to me. I've got the answers for those things. But secondly, for us, and I think more devotionally, probably personally for us, it's to remind ourselves that Christianity is a specific religion. I don't mean specific in the sense of specific from other religions, but that the practice of Christianity includes a lot of nuanced detail. I think the temptation for us in the West is to think of Christianity in very simplistic terms. And that's not because the message of Christianity isn't simple. Jesus died for you. You are forgiven. You will live forever by faith in him. That's a simple message. But Christianity, as it is played out in your life, is very nuanced, is very specific, very detail-oriented. The tough thing for us as Christians is we're very often tempted to say, I know what I know, and that's enough. I know the basics, and that's good for me. That's not really what a Christian believes. A Christian believes that the detail that is contained in the scriptures is worth working through. That there are a lot of different things that Jesus said and did, and they have implications for a lot of different areas of my life. Paul's letters, they're so long because he's working out the implications of belief in Jesus into different areas of Christian life. And we ought to do the same thing. To understand that Christianity is not just this thing we do on the side, but it has its tentacles, for lack of a better way of talking, into every aspect of our life. That every decision that I make, every moment of my life should be influenced by what the scriptures say because the scriptures have something to say. I think our fear is to reduce the scripture down to only talking about what we're going to do for eternity, but not about all the different things that happen in our life. And if we believe that being a Christian is just about knowing the simple message, we lose something. We lose the fact that Jesus has given us an entire life to live, that he's not just an escape plan. He's a brother who walks with us. He gives us a new purpose to our life. He gives us a way to really be human. The way that the Apostle Paul says it in the text that we read was that we are wise for salvation through the scriptures. Wise for salvation. It's a phrase that doesn't show up anywhere else in the scripture. But it seems that what Paul is saying is that the scriptures not only teach you about salvation, but that they give you all of the steps along the way to that salvation. That there is wisdom given to you in every moment of every day. And that if we were willing to dig into that text, to look at all the details, we would find the nuance that the scripture holds.